All right, guys. So we're gonna start special senses here with this lecture. We're gonna break kind of special senses up into a couple different parts. We're gonna do two sections of eye because there's a lot of different structures and things that go with that, and then we'll do one section of just the ear. Um, sorry, and then we'll try to finish things up by Friday of next week. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into this. So special senses, real quick. These are some of the ones that we kind of talk about. So special senses are really those three basic senses: temperature. Uh, sorry, senses of touch. So temperature, pressure, and pain. So touch, temperature, pressure, pain usually is kind of referred to as the four senses. And then we have a couple of the special ones that we kind of refer to. We have smell, taste, sight, hearing, and then as well as balance, or essentially what we refer to as equilibrium. Okay. The eye, kind of getting into that. So about 70% of all of our sensory receptors are actually in our eye. There's about 1 million different nerve fibers directly associated with each eye. And then protection of the eye, really a couple different things. So it's most of the eye is really kind of housed within that bony orbit of the skull. So it's got a superior ridge that goes across the top. There's an inferior ridge that goes across the bottom. And really only the very front part or the very anterior portion of the eye is actually exposed. And then the portion that is exposed is then further protected by this little piece of cushioning of fat that actually goes around the eye. It's under both lids. You've got a little bit of fat that kind of helps kind of keep it from getting damaged. Some of the basic accessory structures of the eye that we have are the eyelids themselves. So there's an upper and lower. And then there are eyelashes. And the main purpose for those is really, so here's your upper eyelid or lower eyelid, and then the eyelashes attached to them. They're there to really help keep kind of foreign debris from getting into the eye itself as well. The eyelashes do a pretty good job at trying to block most of that out. And then anything that doesn't get out is the eyelashes to kind of, or the eyelid to kind of take care of. There are several different glands, what we call Meibomian glands. They essentially are modified sebaceous glands, or modified oil glands. They are really there to help produce this kind of oily secretion that helps lubricate the eye, or what we kind of refer to as tears. All right, they're housed around the outside of the eye. And what they do is they produce this kind of fluid that floats over the surface of the eye to keep it both moist as well as to keep it protected against anything that would get into there. And for the most part, all of that kind of drains towards the center of the eye, towards the center of the face, towards the medial portion of the eye here. So it can either be drained down through the what's called nasolacrimal duct, which it eventually ends up into the nasal sinus and then can be swallowed, or essentially then tears up in the center. And when you close your eyes, it runs down the side of your face. We have a couple other ones that are ciliary glands. These are also modified sweat glands. These are specifically between the eyelashes themselves. And then we have a couple other structures. So we have what's referred to as the conjunctiva. All right, so this is the thin membrane that actually lines the eyelids, and then it connects the eyelids to the surface of the eye. There are several secretions that are produced that help lubricate that. So that's one of the reasons why when you blink, that'll help kind of force some of those structures out. It's also one of the reasons why if you can just keep somebody to get their eye closed and keep it that way for a short period of time, if they have something in there, that usually whatever piece of debris is in there will work its way out because it'll hit this membrane. The membrane mucus will then kind of pull it out to the surface, and then it can usually either be flushed out or the secretions will take it out itself. This is also one of the areas of the eye that tends to get a little bit more of a little bit more of a disorder issue with it, because that conjunctiva is prone to inflammation. So we get what's called conjunctivitis. All right, conjunctivitis is just simply inflammation of that conjunctiva. It could be a couple different things. We could have excess mucus production, so the eye will start to kind of essentially tear up. You can also get it irritated by substances that can make it very itchy. Pollen, debris, dust, anything gets in there can kind of do that. And then the other thing that can happen here is it become very swollen. Conjunctivitis a lot of times can be referred to as pink eye, essentially, because that's all that we're really looking at here. Is it's either an inflammation or some sort of excess production of that mucus. But usually pink eye is more associated with a bacterial infection that causes this. All right. The other thing that we have then are some lacrimal ducts. All right, there's lacrimal ducts associated around the outside of the eyelid. You can see here, they're showing us a diagram here. Here's the eyelid itself. So this is the upper, lower, and then the lashes. The lacrimal ducts are up here at the top. And they're constantly producing this lacrimal fluid that helps kind of flush the eye itself. There's the kind of thing. There's two organs in the body essentially that clean themselves. Your eye is one of them, and the uterus is the other one. Otherwise, this is one of the basic things that happens here. So that lacrimal fluid is produced at the top, flushes the eye, which is why closing the eyelid a lot of times will get whatever in there out. There's also these little lacrimal sacs. There's little passages that get of the lacrimal fluid towards the nasal cavity, right? So they're kind of housed around the outside of the eye as well. So as the fluid makes its way down to the lower eyelid, it will then make its way into the nasal cavity. Nasal lacrimal duct, this is the one I was talking about. This is one that sits pretty much directly in the center of the eye, the medial portion. Again, empties into the nasal cavity. Functions of all that, they produce this kind of diluted salt solution, essentially what we refer to as tears. In that salt solution are antibodies as well as lysosomes. So it will actually get rid of most any kind of foreign invaders as well as then kind of break them down. So it's there to help not only protect, but also moisten and kind of keep that eye lubricated. And then obviously at some point in time, all that ends up in the nasal cavity, unless you have some sort of conjunctivitis, which could cause a plugging of that lacrimal, that nasolacrimal duct, and then you would have kind of a buildup of that, and usually that's what's associated with that conjunctivitis, is that kind of matting of the eye because that fluid has nowhere to go. We also have some muscles that control movements of the eye. So there's muscles on the outer surface of the eye, and they're connected not to the anterior surface, and then they connect to the back portion of the orbit itself. And that's what helps us produce a lot of these movements within the eye. So the side to side, the up and down, you can kind of rotate them in a circle a little bit, depending on the various ways that the eye is used. This is also one of the ways that especially in my job as an athletic trainer, we can figure out if somebody actually has an orbital fracture. Because if they have an orbital fracture, because of the way the muscles connect, they usually will lose motion in one part of the eye or the other. So the most common one is a inferior orbital fracture. So if they have that, usually what you can do is you'll have the patient look up, they'll look down, and then you ask them to look back up again, and they can't look back up. The eye gets trapped in that fracture, and then the muscle tissue doesn't allow it to move in there. It's not uncommon also to get a superior orbital fracture, and it would just be the opposite. You'd have them look up, look down, all right. And usually after they've looked up, they can't look back down because the muscle tissue then is not connected there, and it kind of traps that in that portion. Okay. These are some of the big structures that you really kind of need to know for the assessment, though, so that there are these what are called three tunics of the eye. There's a fibrous tunic, a vascular, and a sensory tunic. We'll go over each one of these here in just a second. But the fibrous tunic, for the most part, is the outer portion, which is called the sclera. That's the white portion of the eye. The vascular tunic is this middle portion that contains all the blood vessels. And then the sensory tunic is the inner portion, which most often is referred to as the retina. That's the yellow here in the diagram, which allows us essentially the sense of sight once we get light to kind of fall on that layer. This is just another diagram that kind of shows you your basic portions here. Again, here's your sclera, the white portion of the eye. All right, here's the vascular, the choroid layers, which is mostly referred to as. All right, and then here's your retina right here across the back, the yellow layer. That's the sensory tunic. This large kind of what looks like almost a gelatin sac. This is the vitreous humor. All right, the space above and the space out here in the anterior is the aqueous humor. It's mostly kind of water that fills the eye. This is what's referred to as the cornea. All right, the anterior portion of the sclera, which allows light to pass through it. This would be the iris right here on both sides. The opening to the iris is the pupil. This right here would be the lens. You got what are called suspensory ligaments that attach to the lens and kind of hold it in place. And then these little structures on the ends of those are actually muscles. They're called ciliary bodies. They contract to essentially change the shape of this lens to help us focus light on the back of the eye. This little circle right here is what's known as the fovea centralis. All right, that's the area of the eye with the highest acuity. So what happens is the lens tries to bend the light so it lands on that little fovea. And any application of a device on the outside of the eye that we try to do is also trying to do that. So if we put a contact lens on here, we're trying to help the lens focus that light there. If we use glasses, again, the glasses are trying to correct for the problem with the lens to help us focus the light on the back. Okay. Here's just kind of a scan of the inside of your eye. If you've ever gone to the eye doctor, you might have seen this. They usually take a camera and take a picture of the inside of your eye. What they're looking for is they're looking for the health of the eye. So they do want to see some blood vessels and want to make sure that there isn't any deterioration of them. They want to be able to see pretty plainly the fovea centralis, and they also want to be able to see this little portion here called the optic disc. If I go back, your optic disc is this little portion right back here at the back of the eye where the different portions of the retina actually meet. It's also referred to as your blind spots. You can't see anything in that little area. Okay. All right. This is kind of looking. This is what the doctor kind of is looking for, right? So this is normal, healthy optic nerve, and this is somebody who has glaucoma. So glaucoma is an increased pressure in the eye. So because there's an increased pressure, it's pushing up against that optic nerve, and it tends to show up as a little more bright white. Okay. This just shows the different variations of the issues that are with that. So if you, it should be somewhere between 1.4 millimeters, and if it gets up closer to 2.4 millimeters, then we have to kind of worry that we've got some damage there. The rest of those tunics then, so we'll start here with the fibrous tunic. We just talked about that. That's the sclera. That's the white portion of the eye. Anteriorly, we always call it the white of the eye. So that's the portion that we can kind of see around the outside of the iris, or the colored portion. In front of the sclera is what's referred to as the cornea. So this is just that area which allows light to pass through it. So we refer to it as the transparent central anterior portion of the eye. It does allow light to pass through it. It actually can repair itself. So you might have heard of anybody getting a scratched cornea, and then usually for a day or two, they have to wear an eye patch. But that eye patch allows that cornea then to heal. Usually a scratched cornea can make people very sensitive to light, and pulling that light away allows that tissue to kind of heal. It's one of the only tissues in our body that can actually be transplanted without fear of rejection. So they can actually go in, somebody who's got say like cataracts. Cataracts would be where there's a buildup on this cornea so that it no longer becomes very opaque. Similar to, say, like if you had a glass shower, and as the hard water builds up in the glass shower, it creates a film. That's kind of the idea of the cornea. We can actually go in and remove that cornea, and then we can replace it with a healthy donor cornea, and that would be allow the patient then to be able to regain their sight. Okay. The other layer then, the choroid layer, this is the middle layer. This is the blood-rich portion of the tunic. This layer also has a pigment embedded in it that doesn't allow light to scatter, because otherwise light would just pass through this layer and then out, and we wouldn't get the image that we would like to. This layer is also modified interiorly into two structures. So it makes up part of the ciliary body, which is the smooth muscles that are attached to those little ligaments that hold the lens. And then there also is another section of it called the iris, and that's the pigmented portion on the front of your eye that has the pupil in it. All right. The last portion then is the sensory tunic. That's your retina. The retina itself contains two photoreceptors. One of them are called the rods. The other one are called cones. We'll talk about those two here in just a second. They signal. They actually produce a signal that is transmitted to the neurons in the brain. So there's two different types here. We got what are called bipolar neurons and ganglion neurons. We're going to talk more about those when we get into the nervous system, but those are the two areas. And then those signals are transmitted from the retina towards the brain so that we can view them. Without that signal getting to the brain, even if the eye was functioning properly, you still wouldn't see an image. The brain has to interpret that signal and kind of tell us what we're seeing. Okay. This just shows you a little bit of kind of how those neurons are presented. So they're along the back portion of the wall here. All right. So here's the retina itself, this yellow layer, and you can see that that's kind of along the back wall. If you look at them in terms of this, you can see there are way more rods than there are cones. The rods do color. cones do black and white, right? So we don't need as many of them, but you can see their presentation of them. Okay, so rods are found most on the edges of the eye or edges of the retina. Sorry, I misspoke there. Rods do low light, cones do color. Right, makes sense. C, cones, color. So the rods, most are found towards the edges of the retina. They allow us for kind of this dim vision in our peripheral, which is why if you kind of look at something but don't focus on it in your peripheral vision, you probably wouldn't be able to tell a person what color it is, because really all they do is kind of perceive stuff in kind of gray tones. Okay. Animals have this little layer on the back portion of their eye that help them focus things in dimmer light. We as humans have evolved away from that because we don't spend a lot of our time out at night. Nocturnal animals have more of it than others, but that's why when you take a photo or shine a light at an animal, they get this kind of a glow to it. So they have what's referred to as a tapetum. All right, tapetum lucidum is the full name. It's all it is this reflective layer on the back of the eye that allows the animal to see better in low light. So it amplifies whatever light's going into the eye, and then helps to disperse that throughout the eye so the retina picks it up, which is why animals have a better vision in low light than what we do as humans, because we don't have that. Okay. The other section then are the cones. So those are the other neurons. These are the ones that do color. All right. They're densely packed right in the center of the retina towards the back. The fovea centralis is pretty much all cones. All right. And then there's that spot in the optic disc where there is actually no photoreceptors, which we call our blind spot in the back there. Okay. The cones see a couple different colors. So they mostly see red, blue, and green. All right, but that allows us to kind of give us those different spectrums of light. So there are 3 types of cones. All right, we have red, blue, and green cones. All right, different cones are sensitive to different wavelengths of light. Your green and reds are your higher wavelengths. The blues are lower wavelengths. People that are colorblind actually lack usually one cone or the other. So people who are red-green colorblind lack either red or green. And people that are blue-black colorblind usually lack these blue ones, so they can't tell the difference kind of between dark blues and light blues. Okay. You can also get color blindness. So this is a kind of a chart that you use to show that color blindness. All right. So the top area up here would be the difference between kind of a color blindness pattern for different variations. So this is a gray circle with the number 12 in it. All right, this is more of a reddish circle with a green 5 in it. So this is more red-green colorblind here. People who are red-green probably just see red or see green. All right, they don't see everything. All right, again, here's red-green. It's an 8. Another red-green, this is a 3. All right, another one, we got a 29 in it. And then the last one here is a 15. All right, again, people who are colorblind can't see that. All right, they usually either see one color or the other, or they just see gray. All right, a lot of times because they're missing those rods, those cones in the back of the eye. Okay. All right, we're going to go and stop here. We'll pick back up with some of the other structures on Monday and finish those up.